Hey, welcome to On the Clock, a collaboration between the Pack-A-Day Podcast and the Draft Fellows. I'm Andrew Murdick. That is Kyle Fellows. Together, we are the Draft Fellows, and leading up to the draft, we'll be doing a series that covers picks 1 through 32, each team's biggest needs and who they should be considering at their pick. You can check out the video of every one of the episodes on the Draft Fellows channel on YouTube. All of the audio versions are on the Pack-A-Day channel, and we are already on to pick 25 and the Houston Texans. Kyle, how are you doing?
I'm good. I'm excited to talk about the Houston Texans. And today's conversation is interesting because I feel like Houston is one of those teams that we've kind of telegraphed the needs for. We assume that it's probably wide receiver or offensive line, which makes me think that the Houston Texans are just going to go in some crazy direction that we just don't see coming. But those are the needs that are most obvious. There are depth needs for this team, but the screaming needs are at those spots. And I think that early in the offseason, the assumption was that the Texans would almost certainly select a wide receiver with their first pick, just because, they lost Stephon Diggs to free agency. We just found out that he recently landed with the New England Patriots, and they lost Tank Dell to just a really, really frustrating injury. And so they got to find some weapons to go with Nico Collins there for CJ Stroud. But then Houston traded their starting left tackle, Laramie Tunsil, to the Commanders, which opens a huge need for them on the offensive line. And in the last week or so, they've brought in some tackles, Cam Robinson, Trent Brown, who are there on one-year deals to kind of hold things together for 2025. But they probably need something a little bit more sustainable for the future. So they could go in a different direction, but it feels like offensive line or wide receiver are probably the top needs for this team.
Yeah, and it seemed like maybe talent wasn't necessarily the biggest indicator of the reasons why they moved on from their offensive linemen. Maybe they wanted a group that would gel a little bit more,
Yeah.
do things the way that their organization wanted them to. And so I think if you take a look at players that might be available at pick 25, that would be of interest. If you want to start at wide receiver, Tetero McMillan from Arizona, while sort of widely be considered a top 10 pick up until about January, now could be available in this range. I think you talk about Matthew Golden could potentially stay in Texas, or Emeka Ibuka from Ohio State. If you want to stick with the interior offensive line, Gray Zabel from North Dakota State. Don't know if he'll be around here, but obviously would be a really nice addition to this offensive line group. Tyler Booker from Alabama, if they want more of a road grader. Kelvin Banks Jr., another Texas player who could stay in his home state. You talk about offensive tackle, Josh Simmons from Ohio State, Josh Connerly Jr. from Oregon, maybe Arante Ursary from Minnesota, if they're looking more at that developmental plan of having a player ready for 2026. So who do you think are some players that would really fit in well if the Texans are picking to pick 25?
Yeah, from talking with you before we hit record on this, I know that you're going to mention a certain wide receiver here with some Ohio State ties. So I'll leave that for you a little bit, but I love that fit. I know that the Texans have also done their homework on Matthew Golden, and I love Matthew Golden as much as anybody. Probably more. And so I would love to see him catching balls from CJ Stroud. But at the same time, I kind of wonder if they might target a wide receiver with some more slot tendencies to complement what they have in Collins already. But I'll say that I think Houston could be really intrigued by some of the offensive tackles that you mentioned. Josh Simmons' medicals are a huge, huge question. But without those questions, he would be my top tackle in this class, and I think that he can be that true left tackle, which there's not a lot of in this class in particular. So maybe the Texans roll the dice on someone like that now that they have a few of those stopgap options in the building who can play until Josh Simmons is fully ready to go, and then you do have your new left tackle of the future. So a couple different directions I could see them going with it.
Yeah, and I think Josh Simmons is a really intriguing fit for any team, but especially for the Texans, because I think, if he's ready to go right away, you could plug him in at guard for this year since he has the two veteran tackles, and let him recover in there where his movement skills aren't going to be quite as important. He has played guard in the past and can certainly do that at the NFL level. And then looking at 2026, you have a potential starting left tackle and maybe a very, very good one at that. So I think that sort of fits a couple of different areas of need for the Texans going forward. And you're right, I stole one of your guys here. I went with Emeka Ibuka, the wide receiver out of Ohio State, and I think it's like, first of all, it's a reunion with CJ Stroud, so that's fun. Two, his route running ability really provides something different for this team. And like, remember, Stephon Diggs actually looked pretty good before his injury, and I think that kind of production could be duplicated with Ibuka. So whether you want him to play outside or, as you mentioned, being a primary slot receiver, I think he can be really successful in either one. And we know CJ Stroud likes throwing to players out of the slot, and I think having that reliable route runner who's probably a really under thought of athlete. In addition, he could be a massively productive player in Houston.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a fascinating thing to watch if Ibuka were to get that far. There's been some rumors that Ibuka could fall out of the first round. This is a
Mhm.
weird wide receiver class to try to figure out. And so, who goes first? I mean, there's kind of a cluster of guys at the top. Ibuka maybe is kind of stuck in this sort of a slot role, but I mean, he's not limited to that. But you want to use him, I think, there as much as you can. Where does the NFL value that? But I love the fit here with the Texans, with someone who can complement Collins, the other wide receiver, and do some very, very different things. And then you mentioned the connection with CJ Stroud. So I think it makes all the sense in the world. Will he be on the board at 25? We'll have to wait and see. But thanks for joining us for another round of On the Clock. Make sure you like and subscribe to the show and stick with us as we preview all 32 teams in this series leading up to the 2025 NFL Draft. From the draft room to the gridiron, the Draft Fellows have got you covered. Until next time, stay tuned and stay in the game.